Well, good morning, everyone, all our listeners on the radio, and of course, those of you who join us on YouTube and who download the podcast. Welcome to another edition of Rethinking Freedom. This is a place where we actually think through what does freedom mean for us and what actions are we going to take to bring about the freedom we say that we want. We are rethinking everything that we've been taught, and we're making different decisions and different choices. And today, we are going to be talking about what justice must look like for us all and how we can reimagine this concept of not just justice, but our democracy and how they all weave in and tie in together. So I want to frame why this episode today is so important, because today we're talking about the weight of the gavel. And we're going to be speaking with none other than Judge Amber Givens on power, reform, and retaliation in Texas. In a state as large and as diverse as Texas, with more than 30 million people, we have had only one Black justice in the entire history of the Texas Supreme Court. Supreme Court. Understand what judges and courts do, right? And only a handful of Black judges serving at the district and appellate levels. When we look at the bench across Texas, especially at the higher courts, Black representation is not just low, sometimes it is non-existent. This is not accidental, my friends. Most things in America are not accidental, and quite frankly can be traced back to some form of racism. That, unfortunately, is the root of the whole creation of this nation we call the United States of America. There is a long history of exclusion, political gatekeeping, targeted attacks, and systemic barriers that have made it extraordinarily difficult for Black judges to win, retain, and serve in office. And when Black judges do break through those barriers, they often face a unique set of pressures, professional, political, media-driven, and I'm going to say often deeply racialized. This is why representation matters. Judges shape lives, shape communities, and shape the trajectory of justice. And when the bench does not reflect the people it serves, justice, my friends, becomes distorted. And when judges of color are pushed out, silenced, or politically punished, our democracy, your democracy, suffers. Today's guest is no stranger to those realities. Of course, I am your host, Aya Barinelli, and I happen to be an attorney as well. But today we're going to be speaking with the incredible, and I do say incredible, Judge Amber Givens. She's a powerful voice at the intersection of justice, reform, and resilience. And she currently presides over the 282nd Criminal District Court in Dallas County, no small feat. A position, by the way, that she has held since January 1st, 2015. So yes, Black don't crack. She went to law school and graduated when she was 8 years old. And now she's been on the bench. Yes, because I'm looking at the screen. If you're on YouTube and you're going, 2015, how is that possible? She looks 25. Okay. Before taking the bench, she spent 8 years as an assistant district attorney in both New York and Texas. She's a proud graduate of Tuskegee University. Go Golden Tigers, right?
Yes, right? you know. Yes.
Okay, there you go. And Syracuse University College of Law, and she's licensed to practice in both New York and Texas. Her commitment to justice extends beyond the courtroom, as you will hear. She serves on the Dallas County Juvenile Board, the Tyler Street Foundation Board, and has created multiple community-centered programs from the bench, because that is why we need diversity on the bench. You hear a little bit about this program, 2 of which have received national media attention. Her leadership has been widely recognized, including being named a Texas Bar Foundation Fellow and the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers Outstanding Mentor for 2020-2021. Judge Amber Givens, welcome to Rethinking Freedom. We're so blessed and honored to have you as a guest today.
Wow. Thank you, Aya. I appreciate, what an amazing intro. I love it. I'm excited to be here with you all today.
Well, thank you. So we're going to jump right into this because we have a lot to discuss, don't we?
Yes, we
First of
do.
all, congratulations on just your excellence and what you've been able to accomplish and to be in the seat that you are today. As a fellow lawyer, that is no small feat. It's one thing to go to law school. It's another thing to pass the bar, and people don't. It's another thing to ascend to where you have ascended to. But before we talk about a case that you have that is upcoming here that we want our listeners to know about. Can you share a little bit about your background and how you rose to this esteemed position of judge here in the state of Texas?
So I will tell you, I never wanted to be a judge, just by the way. That was never the goal for me. I really was impacted by the justice system at an early age. One of my siblings was incarcerated twice. And that really shaped kind of how I saw the justice system. I saw when, the justice system failed to see people as such, and how that impacted my entire family. And it really drove me to seek my law degree. And then beyond that, my professor at Tuskegee said that the law was created to keep you as chattel. And so you have to master it. And I thought, yep, I was headed to the right spot, law school.
Yes.
And then thinking, let me be a prosecutor, right? Because more people with my lived experience need to be in those spaces, because I've lived the experience of seeing a loved one impacted by the justice system. And so I was super comfortable there. Loved the experience because I felt like I wore a cape every day. Like, I get to do the right thing every day. That's where all the discretion lies. That's where all the power is at the DA's office. You get the power to do the right thing, to make sure that people are not targeted based on their socioeconomic status or what have you, right? But I actually moved to Dallas because the Craig Watkins offered me a position at the DA's office in Dallas. And, he's the first elected Black DA in Texas. He was also, beyond that, the first to create a conviction integrity unit. And so I was super excited to come on board, because I really believe from the top to the bottom, the goal was justice and not to seek convictions. And so I was really comfortable in that space. And then, the way God works.
The way God works.
The way God works, he will tell you it's time to move on to something else. And you're like, but wait a minute, God, now I'm comfortable here.
I'm comfortable.
I'm thinking I'm doing the work that you want me to do. And he's like, no, but there are other things on the list, right? And so in 2013, after only being in Dallas for a year, God said, it's time. And I didn't have any money saved. I had just been in Dallas for a year. People said I was too young. I had a very tight, coily afro at the time, still natural, but I don't rock my fro as much. And people said that would be offensive to voters, that I needed to perm or relax my hair to be acceptable. Yes. And, so many messages there. But yes. God said that this was the trajectory. And so I walked forward in the path that he created for me. And blessed to have been able to serve since 2015. It's been quite the wild ride.
You just skipped a whole bunch.
I did.
Running for office at that level, running for office where you are not seen as one of, because I moved to Texas 16 years ago and I'm still kind of an outsider. So I can't even imagine how it was jumping in at looks, prejudices, all of that. Yes. Okay, maybe not a conversation for today, but I just want people to understand that even though she glossed over that, you don't just run for office and win. You put in effort, you put in sweat, you put in tears, you put in your own money. I'm sure you did not sleep for that whole, yes, but carry on.
Look, I mean, and you're right, I really do, because when I think about it, it doesn't resonate all the time with me that the bench is not as diverse as we think. And I think it's because being in Dallas County, like, we have one of the highest numbers of African-American judges in the country. And so that's what I see every day. So I don't think about the national landscape all the time. And even like, I skipped over and didn't give God all the glory, because you're right. It was not easy to run for office for the first time, having only lived in this county for, a year. I didn't kiss the ring. I didn't do all the things that you're supposed to do to run for office. And I will just say this: God is so good that he put people in my pathway that had no reason to want to hear me out, want to support me financially, but they did. And so, it's really one of those things where when we talk about faith, when he said just step and I'll provide the pathway, just keep walking forward even though you don't see the direction. And that's how it was quite the experience that I probably need to write a book about, because you're right, there's no way, I think, to summarize. It just isn't.
You do. And I'm going to have to say this, because I now have children who are at 3 different HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that having been a product of Tuskegee University, and those of you who don't know about Booker T. Washington, put a pin in it and go do some research.
Yes.
Certainly helped to shape who you are. But we
For
do
sure.
want to get to the meat of what you're experiencing at this point. But yeah, I see what historically Black colleges and universities do with our young people.
Yeah.
And I see those of you who are graduates step out here kind of a little different.
Yeah, we do show up differently. I'm going to tell you, I can name so many folks from Tuskegee. I mean, just recently, Deshaun Jones, Harris County State District Judge. The way Deshaun showed up for the people in Harris County, like none other. Marilyn Mosby, in Baltimore. I could go on and on and on. We're Booker T's kids. We do show up differently, because for us, being in service is not about power. It's about the people. Mm-hmm. And so when you serve in that capacity, it looks different. There are a lot of sacrifices that you end up taking on, because it's not about you being in that position, right? It's about you being situated to be in a space where you can actually change the system itself from the inside. And so that comes with its own battles. And I have to laugh about it, but it's been.
Yeah. So let's address some issues that I think for me are just like elephants in the room, white elephants, no less. Mm-hmm. You definitely witnessed firsthand the unique pressures of being a Black judge, the political, social, and even professional challenges that you all face that are different, and I would say even more intense than any other jurist, if you will.
So what has amazed me the most is the fact that people do not feel a real sense of ownership in the criminal justice system, because we always want to distance ourselves. Like, that will never be my family. Why should I care about the criminal justice system? And I always tell jurors after they finish serving, we really all should have a sense of ownership in the system. It's imperative that when you get a summons, that you show up, whether it's for grand jury service or a regular jury trial, because we as the people, right, we own the system. We are all guaranteed a right to a fair trial of a jury of our peers. But if our peers don't show up, and if we don't get a good cross section of the community to come, then who really owns the system? Who is checking the system, right? And so I think that's one thing that has astonished me, is just how important a judge's role is to close the gap between the courthouse and the community, because we all need to feel that weight, really, and own the system.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of the things, I'm someone who's actively out there trying to get people registered to vote and educate folk and tell people to go and vote. And one of the things I try to point out to folk is, if you're not registered to vote, if you're not actually exercising this right to vote, you will not be called to be a juror.
Well, so here's the thing. They just have to be eligible to register. They don't actually have to vote.
So here it's like they're looking at.
To see. Oh.
Yes. Okay. And so we're telling people, get on the voting rolls. Like, listen, use all the avenues for liberation, I guess is the point. So people,
for sure.
Whatever. Yeah.
Because even then, right, you're voting and you're putting, in Texas, at least, you're putting these judges on the bench.
Yes,
right?
You are.
And these judges, when we talk about jury trials and showing up, right, The umpire in the judge is the one who calls the balls and strikes and decides during voir dire if someone says something that shows that they are not impartial. Does the judge let them on the jury anyway, or does the judge exercise a strike for cause to make sure that you don't get somebody in the back in the jury room that has an agenda, right?
Yeah.
So it's like on an everyday basis, these state district judges are so, and judges just overall are so important.
Yeah. In terms of what comes in and what comes, I've often felt like with the American judicial system, and unfortunately, a lot of the judicial systems are based on Western law, that it's not about justice; it's about winning. And there are times when I would talk to my, an opposing counsel or whatever, and I'm like, can we just do the right thing? But the right thing a lot of times is not the winning strategy. And so there we have it. And of course, in states like Texas, where our government has actually made gone into contracts, agreements with private prisons, assuring them that they will have at least 80% capacity or the state will pay. There is actually an incentive to lock people up. Y'all might not know that, but let's talk about your current situation.
Yes.
You are now pursuing legal action against Dallas County. What led to this decision? And what do we need to know and understand about your pursuit of fairness in this case? What's going on?
Okay. So I want to start off by just sharing with the people, this story is so much more, it's so much bigger than me, right? This is a part of a long history in America where political institutions punish certain leaders who challenge injustice, right? So it's not just about me. I mean, we can trace it all the way back to name a civil rights leader, right? And what was
any of them? COINTELPRO, all of them. Yes.
Right. And so it's so much bigger than this. And this is applicable to, if you look at any leader that has been attacked, and when I say attacked, the goal ultimately being to make sure that they're not legitimate in your eye, right? If they're effective, look at what happens once they're identified as effective in our system, right? And so that's why I want people to understand that it's not just about a judge in Dallas County, right? This is bigger. This is a message. It sends a message to people all over the country that, should you dare to step out and step in the gap for people and ensure that the right thing happens, or should you be timid and sit back because that's the easiest thing for you personally? And I want people in these spaces who have the ability to create that change. I want them to have the audacity to step out and do the right thing, right? Because you will be met with struggles, but it's the right thing to do. It's kind of a moral compass deal.
Yeah.
Should I have sat back and been comfortable in my own space, or was it more appropriate and God called me to the position? Should I have stepped out? And my answer will always be, regardless of what's happened in these last 5 years, that stepping out was the right thing to do. So now when you talk about battles, Aya, there's so many, but my upcoming trial is December 10th and 11th. And it's against Ken Paxton's office. And there's a long explanation of how and why Ken Paxton's office is handling my appeal against the Judicial Commission in Texas. It's because they can. The commission can decide to ask the Attorney General's office to take over, and that's what's happened in this instance.
And I think, again, for people, whenever you are listening to Rethinking Freedom, we ask you, if you're not driving, to take notes, because there are always additional points of reference to things that you might want to go and research. If you're in the state of Texas, you should be aware of the impeachment process that Ken Paxton went through. You should be aware that there was all kinds of evidence. And as an attorney, he should have been impeached if we were going by the law. But it was totally a political decision. But this is someone himself who has been under numerous indictments and so on and so forth, and investigations, and who has been laser focused on attacking just about anything that came out of the Obama White House to begin with, and then, of course, by extension, the Biden White House, but also really making life difficult for people of color in any way possible. But carry on. So,
So
yes,
it all started, if we want to go back to the origin, it
yes,
all started in 2020. So George Floyd was murdered in May of 2020.
yes,
And we all saw it play out online, right? If you didn't know how your dentist felt about race relations in America, you found out. Your
yes.
your anything, just plug in the blank. Your gynecologist, your next door neighbor, your kid's teacher, everyone was online expressing their opinions. And nothing different in Dallas County. On June 1st of 2020, there was a defense attorney who posted a Facebook comment, and he tagged attorneys in it, and he was recounting their comments about Black people being animals and subhuman. And by the time I saw the Facebook post, it was public. I said, oh my, it's like 400 comments on here, because he tagged them in the post, right? And he said, it's time to discuss it now. And there were hundreds of likes. And I saw some of my colleagues in the comments, and they said, oh my gosh, they're racist. I'm going to unfriend them on Facebook. And I thought, but does that solve the issue here, right? Because the 14th Amendment and the 6th provide that people, even if you can't afford to pay for an attorney, you're entitled to counsel, right? And in Dallas County, that means that we have this thing called the wheel, and judges decide which attorneys are allowed to be on the wheel. And then once they're approved, then they get court appointed cases. So they've contracted with the county to take less money, right, for these cases. And I thought, it's really incumbent then upon us as judges to ensure that people that believe and express these ideals, whether it's about race, gender, ability, age, any protected class, if you show that you have a bias, then I think it's imperative that we not allow you to receive county dollars for these appointments of indigent people, right? And so,
Of indigent people that may look like the people that you have these prejudices against.
right,
Yes.
that could look like anyone, right? In one of these protected classes. And so I started asking the question, because Dallas County, out of all counties in the United States, Dallas County is number 7 for exonerations. And I thought, wow, when I talked to my friend Christopher Scott, who's an exoneree, he talks about how his attorney didn't identify with him, and how his attorney, because he didn't identify with him, suggested that he plead guilty because the jury was going to find him guilty anyway. And I thought, this is fertile ground to create more exonerations. If we have attorneys who believe these things about people, right, then how are they really protecting their constitutional rights?
Could you hold on one second? For those of our listeners who don't know what an exoneration is, because they haven't had to deal with that, can you just briefly explain what an exoneration is?
So an exoneration, it's essentially someone who was arrested, indicted, and actually convicted for a crime they did not commit. They're actually innocent, right? So in Christopher Scott's case, it was a non-DNA case, right? Meaning there wasn't DNA. And in Dallas, we kept DNA, right? We didn't have the science, but we kept the DNA kits until science caught up, right? And then you have Mr. Watkins, who created the Conviction Integrity Unit. And they started going back and looking at these cases. And Christopher Scott's, like I said, was not a DNA case. The individual who actually committed the murder confessed to Christopher Scott's brother, who was also incarcerated, right? His brother was a barber in a unit in a Texas penitentiary. And he was cutting hair. And the guy said, I really got to get this off my chest. I committed a murder, and there's another guy in a unit serving time for what I did. And he lays out the facts of the case. And Christopher Scott's brother is like,
he's talking about my brother.
Just like my brother's case. And it was, right? Look at how God works, right? But so it's people like Christopher Scott who were actually innocent, but they were arrested, they were indicted, they were convicted, and they served time, right? And they were actually innocent. I can't highlight that enough. They were actually innocent.
So you were making the point that there are over 3,400 counties.
Yeah, it's
or yes, entities considered counties across the country and
Yes.
that Dallas County is number 7
Definitely.
in terms of the number of exonerations, which means that Dallas County gets it wrong more often than most in terms of convicting innocent people.
We have
And that
we have
ties
missed,
back to the representation that you receive. Okay.
yes.
And of
Yeah.
course, who's calling the balls and strikes
Mhm.
as well. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, Dallas County has missed the mark, right?
Okay.
And so in seeing this in 2020, I'm thinking, this is fertile ground for us to create more Christopher Scotts, which we don't want to do or we should not want to do, right? And I started having that conversation in June of 2020 after seeing the post. And 2 months after I started proposing the policy, the anti-discrimination policy, this group of lawyers started filing grievances against me. And it's like you can't divorce the anti-discrimination policy and me working on that from this timeline, right? And their actions. And so June of 2020, I start proposing the policy. August of 2020, they start filing grievances against me.
And what was the policy supposed to accomplish?
So the policy, remember I shared with you all that judges decide which attorneys are allowed to be on this thing called the wheel. So which attorneys are allowed to receive tax dollars to represent indigent people who can't afford to pay for their own attorneys. And so the goal was to ensure that those same attorneys did not receive court appointments, right? And so that's the policy. It's that if you house these beliefs, then we as a county say, no, that's unacceptable. We will not allow you to receive court appointments.
So some people are now concerned, oh, this is going to affect my bag, so to speak. Okay.
Yes, your pockets.
All right. So we're just laying it out so y'all understand the motivations here. So June 2020, you start to propose this anti-discrimination policy. It's catching steam. And by August 2020, what happens?
They start filing the grievances, right? And then I will say this. So that's when the grievances started from this organization. It took me a year and a month to get the policy passed, right? And, one would ask, why did it take so long in a blue county like Dallas to get it passed? That's a whole nother episode, Aya, because I ended up having to go into the community and speak to pastors about this, to get some traction. But it took me a year and a month. And literally the month after I get the policy passed, meaning the policy became an actual part of our indigent defense plan in Dallas County, right? And, if you're nerdy like me, you can just Google it and you can actually see it online, the policy, how it reads. Year and a month is how long it took. Roadblocks, all sorts of things, right? And then a month after that came this whole fake crime, right? And when I say came, a month
and this is coming from the defense.
This is, I don't even want to give them credit saying their name.
All right.
It's a defense. It's a small group of defense lawyers in Dallas. And and they created.
Who would have been impacted by the policy?
Who would have been, yes. And some of them were actually on either tagged in the post that I told you that the attorney made in June of 2020, or they were defending the comments that were being questioned about Black people being animals and subhuman, right? And so a month later, this same organization starts pushing the narrative that was created about a fake crime. And let me give you the timing. So this is like November of 2021 that this all hit the news. Okay. We all know, if you haven't, another nerd moment, Google the October surprise. So in elections, because I was in my election season, there's a thing called the October surprise where your opponent hits you with something hard and, they keep that in the news until your election cycle ends. And then hopefully, right, you don't get reelected.
Yeah, think Comey and Hillary Clinton.
Right. Because see, the things that happen on the national stage happen locally too, right? Yeah. And so here we are. It was November of 2021, and there's this allegation that my court coordinator at the time pretended to be me on Zoom. Now, I will tell you, it did not happen, right? And it was over a bond matter. The attorneys agreed on a bond reduction. I will tell you this because it's public record. I agreed that the bond was high. And while my Zoom wouldn't work and my coordinator was on, she's conveying my orders to them. And somehow this concept of her pretending to be me is created, right?
Mhm.
And I will tell you beyond that, that individual was released on the bond reduction that I granted. And while they said that it was they create this fake crime that she pretended to be me, that individual never went back to jail. The DA's office, the state never asked for that bond associated with the fake crime to ever be withdrawn.
Okay.
They only approached a judge once about the matter, and it was based on one of the conditions that I had set. They were asking if he could go to his family member's house because he had an ELM on his ankle, so an electronic monitor.
Yeah.
And so that was them enforcing that order associated with the fake crime. And if you really thought that the order was bad because you allegedly believed that my coordinator pretended to be me, wouldn't you ask for that order to be rescinded?
Yeah.
You would, for sure, right? Never happened. This individual stayed out on that bond until he pled to pen time, right? And so there you have the fake crime, right? That this small group of lawyers, they pushed that narrative about the fake crime. And it hit the news in November of 2021.
I was going to say, really? This is newsworthy? Seriously? Okay.
Let me tell you. So another lesson, right? I'm an elected official. If an elected official wants to file a defamation lawsuit, right? Because they were defaming me, they were calling me a criminal. I can't just go out
and the news media was all too willing to just run with this story. So I'm pointing these things out so you can remember what we talk about, the pressures and how different aspects of society like lean in on creating really hostile environments for Black judges. And I'll get into that a little bit more, but this is certainly an issue where as a news person, you're like, what is the crime? What are we talking about here? Well, let's see how it plays through before we cover anything. But no, this got a lot of airtime. Okay, go ahead.
It got so much airtime, Aya, like to the point I was on the news in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. I was in the newspaper every day, literally, like no joke. I was like, I need to buy stock because clearly I sell papers.
Yeah.
But back to the defamation point. So an everyday person who's not serving as an elected official can go out and file a defamation lawsuit, right? Period. Somebody said something false about you. An elected official, however, because people talk a lot of mess about elected officials, right? We can't just go out and file a defamation lawsuit. We have to prove that there was actual malice. So meaning when you made the false statement about me, you knew it was false, right? So I have an additional burden to prove in a defamation lawsuit. And so my attorneys filed a 202. Now, a 202 is a discovery tool, right? So that you can responsibly file a defamation lawsuit, right? So you end up asking the court, I need text messages. I need whatever you need to prove the malice part, right? And so in this instance, my attorneys asked for a number of things and our request was granted. So we won the 202 because we got this small group of lawyers' emails. We got their text messages. We got an 8-hour deposition with their president, right? And so by January of 2022, I have all this documentation, right? And that's where, I mean, when I tell you how God works.
May I please share?
Yes.
Just because I'm reading through some of this stuff and I'm going, you have got to be kidding me. So I'm not going to name the name of the group, but it basically calls the name of the group and it says, if they're serious about getting judges off the bench, if so-and-so is serious about getting judges off the bench, then we should act accordingly and quit stopping short of doing that which will actually make a difference. Okay. And so then they're questioning, are we really the organization to do this? So clearly there was an agenda to get you off the bench. Then I see another one. It says, the third question I have is whether, and the group name, I'll just give the initials, DCDLA, is even the appropriate group to do this, given the complete and utter failure of our efforts to keep someone else off the bench. I won't call that person's name.
Oh, we should call her name because she
Okay, our efforts to keep Etta off the bench was, and how popular Givens is. And so they're asking, since we've not done this before, maybe this needs to be outsourced. Who else can we bring in to help us go after the popular Judge Givens, who's popular for a reason? Remember, she'd been serving since 2015, recruited to come to Dallas, right? But been serving as a judge since 2015, no issues at all. None of your decisions, your orders overturned.
No.
And then suddenly in 2020, after you start this anti-discrimination policy, there are all these talking points about how we're going to go after these people. It goes on to say, if we're going after a political solution, we need a political plan. That's more than just going to the press. We need actual on the ground people, social media people, a budget, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have potential, possibly, but we need to be a lot more savvy. So when we talk about, until you read things like this, you might sit back and think, am I being paranoid? Am I seeing things where there's nothing to be seen? But no. And then here was the kicker. I mean, all of them were kickers, but this one I took from our meeting. So by the way, y'all, I'm reading actual email messages that were sent between some of these attorneys who are on this, who are part of this group. Mm-hmm. And this person says, I took from our meeting, there was a short-term goal of getting her charged, her being Judge Givens, or at least investigated with a crime, with the long-term goal being damaging her election prospects. Yes. So there doesn't have to be any crime. There doesn't even have to be the chance that we're going to succeed at this whole thing. What we're just trying to do is create enough negative publicity out there to damage her credibility. Yeah. So when she tries to run again, she doesn't win. And that's how we keep Black judges off the bench, y'all. But please carry on.
Yeah. So the way God works, because the fact that they had enough gall to put that in writing, right? I'm blessed that they did, because like you said, most people would say, oh my gosh, she's just paranoid. She's just creating this story. No, these are their own words. And I say, believe people when you read what they write in private, and they never think it will see the light of day.
Light of day, right? Yeah.
They never thought that their private email communications would ever become public. But you all, I invite you to go to my Instagram page. All those emails are there. Why are they there? Because they're public. They've been public since January of 2022, when my attorneys filed their response in the proceeding that was ongoing at the time, right? So they were on Dallas County's website. They've been there since January of 2022. I will tell you that my publicist at the time sent those emails to the same news stations and newspapers that were printing all the stories about me. And we were told that's not news. So they would continue to print the stories about me being a criminal, but it wasn't news that I actually wasn't one, and that there was really a plot to just make it seem like I was, right? And so man, that's not even the half of it, Aya. Like, there were text messages between them and the news reporters. So you could literally pluck from their text messages the headline and just put it right there on this news station's website. And that's all on Instagram too.
It happens, y'all. Absolutely. Because news reporters are human beings, and they have people that they build relationships with. And some of us are able to just call up a news reporter. And yes, so please carry on.
Yeah. And so remember, you all, the placement of all this, right? So everything hit the news November of 2021. These emails that Aya just read are from November of 2021, right? And so they succeeded in their plan. But I will tell you, I did feel a little special. Like, they needed a budget for me. Okay, we need a budget. Like, it was so much thought was put into that, right? And so that carried on, that investigation. The highest law enforcement agency in the state of Texas started investigating me in November of 2021. And that's the Texas Rangers. I'd invite you to Google their history too. It's colorful. But beyond that, the Texas Rangers, they subpoenaed my phone records, my personal phone records. So not a phone that the county pays for or anything like that, but my personal phone records. They also subpoenaed my Facebook records. And I will tell you, I'm sure that they were so upset because I am probably the most boring person on Facebook or any social media. Like, I'm not out there doing anything crazy, but they wanted to look through my stuff. And I think it cannot be lost on us that this is the American playbook, right?
Yes.
And
FBI,
right, if there's
all of the investigations, and there are budgets, and there are moles, and there are people who are recruited specifically to entrap, get you into compromising situations. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, it's akin to COINTELPRO, right?
Yes.
Because if there's nothing, then we need to go search for something, right? Yes. So in going through my phone records, going through my Facebook records, their goal was to ensure that they found something, because I believe that they knew that there was no crime. And I will say they were provided with these emails too. So not only were the members of the press provided with this information, but so was law enforcement. And I will say this, while I was under investigation in Dallas, it's typical practice that when an individual is under investigation by the grand jury, that they get discovery, right? Meaning their attorney gets police reports and statements of witnesses and things like that so they can prepare what we call a grand jury packet. And the grand jury packet is presented because individuals accused of a crime don't have an absolute right to present before a grand jury. So the only way an individual that's accused of a crime gets to present before a grand jury is if the grand jury wants to speak to them, right? And even then, you don't have an absolute right to have counsel in the grand jury room with you. And so in the absence of the grand jury asking you to be present, you get to, you get to present this packet. Well, my attorneys were denied discovery. We asked several times, and the Dallas County DA's office said no. I thought, wow, I'm being treated differently than everybody else in Dallas County that's under investigation, right? And so in doing that, that investigation lasted from about November of 2021 to September of 2023. And in September of 2023, they shopped the case around, by the way, on this fake crime. They shopped it around the state of Texas. So started in Dallas County, and there are text messages about the current elected DA and his communications with this small group of lawyers. They reported that he said, oh yeah, he's going to start the investigation. He's going to start asking questions, right? And so at some point he starts the investigation, but he recuses himself. And then the case gets shopped around the state of Texas, meaning it went from one DA's office and they either recused or what have you. And so it ended up in Kaufman County. And the Kaufman County DA is a Black female Republican DA. And her office asked on several occasions for my personal cell phone. Now, mind you, I have a right to privacy, right? Just like everyone else in America.
Like everyone else, yes.
Yeah. Regardless of your citizenship, in America, you have these constitutional protections. And so they asked for my cell phone. I said no. They asked again, because their words were, if she'll just turn over her cell phone, then we could dead it. No, if you have nothing, you can dead it now. You don't need my personal cell phone. You just want to go through my stuff, right?
Yes.
And so I said no again. And I was asked to interview with the detective from the Texas Rangers, and I said no. And and ultimately, the Commission on Judicial Conduct kind of chastised me for not what they call cooperating with the investigation. And again, there's so many constitutional implications here. Like, I don't have to, as an accused individual, you don't have to participate in any investigation.
No.
Right? If the government is starting a case, then they need to prove the case, right? And that goes for anybody out there accused of a crime. And so when you take the oath as a judge, you don't waive your constitutional rights to the right to privacy or the right to remain silent. And so I exercised those rights, and I was chastised by the commission for doing so. But ultimately, the DA said Judge Givens committed no crime, right? There was not a big news thing.
No. Let's hear that. Judge Givens committed no crime. But they had to give, because I want to make sure we get to where the part where what we're asking listeners to know and how to support. So you committed no crime, you're cleared, but they still had to take a little dig at you. And what was that dig?
The dig and the dog whistle that I heard very loudly was, but she's unprofessional. So it wasn't a period, because when you're a DA, what is your job? Your job is to determine whether a crime occurred, period. Right? She put a semicolon there. She said, however, she was unprofessional because she refused to cooperate with the investigation. Right. And then here's the thing: when you see the word unprofessional and then you see a picture of me, I have shaved sides all over. Right. I appear to be younger than what I am. And on and on and on. Then you
And
say, okay,
excuse me, and you are Black. Okay, so let's just be clear, because as a Black
yes,
woman, yes, once you get tagged either angry or unprofessional, we know what that is. It's a dog
yes,
whistle, like you said.
yes.
Carry on.
Yeah. And so like that just shows you what the goal really was, right? The goal was not to determine whether a crime occurred, because in writing we see these attorneys say their goal was to get me charged or at least investigated with a crime. It's kind of like fill in the blank here. What crime do you want to, try to get her charged or investigated with or for? And so, that ended, but there was no like big press deal about me not being a criminal. There's like one story, and so then you think, well, it's over, right? Well, no, it's not over, because the Commission on Judicial Conduct in Texas decided once the DA said she couldn't indict me, they would pick up with those grievances, right? And start investigating those, which included a grievance for creating the anti-discrimination policy, which they ultimately decided not to sanction me for. But in their initial sanctions, they sanctioned me for creating the anti-discrimination policy. I'm like, in 2025, I got sanctioned for creating an anti-discrimination policy in 2020 and 2021. And then they changed.
Sounds about white supremacists to me, but carry on.
They changed their minds and didn't sanction me for the anti-discrimination policy, but they sanctioned me for this fake crime, right? Amongst other things. And so I am appealing those sanctions. And when you appeal the sanctions, you actually end up having a trial. So for the first time in 5 years, the first time that there will ever be any real evidence submitted about this will be December 10th and 11th. Okay. Since then, there were statements that weren't even sworn to. And I was questioned, like, gosh, maybe 3 times over the last 5 years by the commission. I had to testify. And I've been the only one under oath, right? But they took action on these other things without ever calling a witness or doing anything. And you would think, because we talk about the commission, right? You would think that this is some, very astute group of people. And I'm not, calling into question their intelligence. Just when you hear the word commission, you think highly of all the people. You think that they're here as an impartial body to do the work for the people. But in reality, in Texas, the commission is really a political tool. Right. And you see that with the things that happened to Judge Ursula Hall in Houston. Like, I could name people, right? It's not just me. And so, and
she was finally cleared.
But
not after going through quite some things. Yes.
Quite some things, but she lost her election.
Yes.
Right? Because remember, it is a political tool. 6 of those people on the commission are judges. There's 1 vacancy now, so there are 5. But they're all Republican. They all identify as Republican. Then you have 5 public members that are appointed by the governor. Now, who do you think he's appointing? And if you go on my page, you'll see pictures of all these people. At least out of the 5, 3 identify as Republican out loud. Okay. The other 2, I couldn't find any proof of their party affiliation. And then the final 2 members are picked by our state bar. And I'm gonna leave that there, because if you know the history of the Texas State Bar,
because we did a show on the constitutional amendments in the state of Texas. What you all, and I'm saying you all who went out and voted and didn't pay attention, did is you actually set it up where the governor has almost complete control over that commission, because you have moved the number of political appointees from 5 to 7. So that's a majority on a board of a commission of 13. So essentially, the governor can pick and choose what judges or what, yeah, this is what we want. Rule this way or don't rule that way. And we did that without paying attention to how we give up our power. But please continue.
Yeah, I would say in Texas, especially, pay attention to these constitutional elections, right? Because we all know that we're not voting like we should, right? And these constitutional elections, the language is complicated. A lot of people don't go out to vote for constitutional elections. You know, a lot of people really just vote in the presidential election cycle. But, you know, there's a gubernatorial election coming up that we all need to turn out for, right? But with this commission now, like you said, Aya, there are 13 people, now 7. So he took away those 2 state bar appointments. Now 7 of the people are from the public that are appointed directly by Governor Abbott. And remember, I told you this is a political tool. And how do we know this? We know this because the highest law enforcement agency in Texas investigated me. A conveniently picked Black female DA, Republican DA in Texas, was appointed to review the matter. And she still had to say I did nothing wrong, but we heard the dog whistle. And then the commission still picks up on this, right? And this is how they even have the constitutional power to take a judge off the bench. Like literally hundreds of thousands of people can vote for you as a judge. And this commission can say, well, we're deciding to take them off the bench. And remember, they can do this without ever calling a witness. Right. And so beyond the constitutional implications, you've got the voting rights implications, right? So you can vote and your vote can be usurped by this committee or this commission, and the governor has power over the commission. And so it's so much to say, but I am fighting the commission on those sanctions. And in order to do so, I had to appeal their June 2025 sanctions of me, which essentially just means I can never sit as a visiting judge. It didn't take me off the bench. They did ask for them to remove me from the bench, by the way. That was their ask in their grievances. But I am appealing. And that appeal,
like based on what? I know judges who've been credibly accused of drug use, you know, DWIs, all kinds of other moral turpitudes and all of that. Based on what are they asking for you to be removed?
I am.
That is crazy.
And okay. Yeah, and so I am appealing the sanctions. And when you appeal, here's the actual trial, right? Mm-hmm. And when you appeal, this is the way it's supposed to happen. The Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court is supposed to close his eyes, stick his hand in a bucket or something where there are names of appellate judges, where he picks 3, right? Because I'm going before a panel of 3 judges. And in my instance, the judge picked 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And I will be before them hearing whatever evidence the Commission on Judicial Conduct is going to present by way of the Texas Attorney General's office, Ken Paxton, because they asked him to take up this appeal. And that's abnormal, but it did also happen to Judge Ursula Hall as well. The commission asked the Texas Attorney General's office to take up the appeal, and they did. And in my instance, same thing. And so I'm asking people to show up in Austin because they need to know that we're watching. They need to know that they can't do this in silence. They need to know that you all appreciate that this is not just about one judge. This is literally about the independence of the judiciary. This is about your voting rights. This is about all the things, right? This is about telling them we recognize the American playbook and we know what you do when people are effective. If I wasn't effective, they would have left me alone, right? Because that's what they do.
Because you're not a threat. Yeah.
And so, you know, I need them to know that you all recognize all these things. And, you know, oftentimes if we don't feel like it directly impacts us, then we sit it out. This does directly impact you because you want judges who have the audacity, who have the courage, who have the tenacity to stand up to these attacks. And I need you all to appreciate that this isn't because I actually did anything wrong. It's because I stood in the gap for people that needed me to do so.
So where in Austin, again, the date and time, where should people go? If they also want to get in contact with you or get more information, like, I don't know if you want to give your Instagram, we can also put it on our YouTube description for those of you who will come back to the YouTube to our YouTube channel. And please, when you do, like, share, subscribe. Our goal is to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of this month, and we need you to make that happen. And of course, we need you to share. You know how the algorithms go. Leave a comment and share, because we do want to have this courthouse packed to see justice served, right? We should all be wanting justice to be served, not just for us, but for everyone else. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So it will be in Austin at the Texas Supreme Court. And it starts at 9 o'clock in the morning on December 10th. And it's a public courtroom. So all are invited, right? We do need to pack it out. The address is 201 West 14th Street, room 104. Okay. And so you can also go to my Instagram page, though, and see there's a flyer on my Instagram page that has the address, the time, and all the information. And, if you can't come both days, we understand and appreciate that. December 10th or December 11th. And, bring a friend, because it's one thing, like I told Aya all the stuff that was in the email, but it's another thing to see it. Right. And so when you come to Austin and you actually see it at play, then you really understand and believe, just by experiencing it, just by watching it, what the true goal really is. And I do want to leave you all with this. When certain leaders challenge entrenched, let me do that again. When certain leaders challenge entrenched systems, the system responds with investigations, surveillance, character attacks, and attempts to delegitimize them, right? And that's what this is. And so I need you all to show up and let them know that you see it for what it is, a page out of the American playbook. When a leader is effective and it just isn't about them, it's about the people. And so December 10th and December 11th in Austin, the flyers on my Instagram. My Instagram is at Judge Amber Givens, Givens. And it's all one word. So Instagram is at Judge Amber Givens. The emails that I read from are there as well. And it's also on my Facebook page. And that's Amber Givens on Facebook.
Well, I want to thank you. Because of time, we're not going to be able to get into the details of the empowerment program that you created. But can you just do like a 20-second on that program?
Yes. So the empowerment program is a program that I funded myself. I created myself after sitting on the bench for 6 months in 2015 and just seeing what people needed, that people on probation were failing. And it wasn't because they wanted to go to prison. It was because literally they needed some additional assistance. And when people succeed on probation, we all succeed, right? Because then you have another person with a job who's being productive and contributing to society. It helps their families. It helps literally all of us. And so that program was a supplemental felony probation program where I picked people that were failing on probation, not the people that were stellar, but the people that needed additional help. Those that had drug addiction issues, those that didn't have a GED or a high school diploma, had very little family support, because I knew that if I partnered them with mentors from the community and we brought in community resources, that they could succeed. They wanted to, they just didn't have the tools. And so that was a 10-month program. And just when I tell you the hundreds of lives that I know we changed just by way of the testimonials of their family members, I know and I've seen the change that when we give a person an opportunity to succeed, they will take it.
And ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, this is exactly why we need judges of the caliber of Judge Amber Givens on the bench. Listen, if you care about the truth, if you care about equity, if you care about representation, if you care about fairness on the bench, this is the moment to pay attention. Judge Givens has laid out just a little bit for us, but like she said, if you go to her social media pages, you'll get more. And more importantly, if you show up in Austin on December 10th and 11th, you're going to be able to hear from both sides and make up your own mind. But it is important that we support judges who fight for fairness, because our system, quite frankly, does not want them in these positions. It is important that we support candidates who reflect our communities. Support on December 10th and 11th. If you cannot be there in person, send her messages, so that she knows that there's support out there. Pray for freedom, pray for fairness, pray for equity to actually be what comes out of this whole situation. I do want to say this quickly before I give the entire floor to our guest, Judge Amber Gibbons. Historically, it's important for me to couch this in historical terms. So we need to understand a little bit about the long road of Black justice in Texas. Key pioneers like Harriet Murphy in Austin was the first Black woman appointed to permanent judgeship in Texas. That only happened in 1973. Understand how long we have been in this country. Understand when the Constitution, when this nation was created, right? People have celebrated July 4th, all of that. First Black woman appointed to a permanent judgeship in Texas was in 1973. Then we had Mary Ellen Hicks in Tarrant County, who was the first Black woman who served above the justice of the peace level. So there are different levels to our judicial system, right? And then in Harris County, Belinda Hill was the first Black woman to preside over Harris County Criminal District Court. Wallace B. Jefferson, you can go and Google him, was the first and only Black justice and Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court. We've never had another one on the Supreme Court in Texas. And understand that that is the highest court in the state of Texas. You appeal, you get to the Supreme Court, and it dies there. Representation matters. And then Morris Overstreet, who was the first African-American elected statewide, because it's really hard to win these statewide races, right? And that was the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Now, of course, we know in 2018, there was a lot of media over the 19 Black women who ran together and were elected in Harris County. But there have always been systemic barriers to Black lawyers becoming judges. First of all, we don't have that many Black lawyers. Depending on what poll you look at or what research you look at, it's anywhere between 5 to 7% across the country. But there are pipeline barriers in terms of the legal profession. It costs a lot to go to law school. Then we have partisan countywide elections and, of course, funding disparities as well. We have voter suppression laws, and Texas has some of the highest number of voter suppression laws, right? And this leads to underrepresentation at the higher court. So understand why it is so important to have someone like Judge Amber Gibbons in the position that she's currently in, and understand why there's so much pushback against her being in that position. So if you listen to part one, we basically talked about the ways that people are coming together to ensure that they either get her off the bench through these sanctions, these investigations, or that they so tarnish her image that she cannot be reelected if she chooses to run for reelection. So the criminal justice system is used as a political weapon. Our taxpayers' money are used to go after these judges. There are PACs that target diverse, reform-minded benches. We see what happened to Mosby in Maryland, in Baltimore. The discipline system is used as a deterrent, right? By the way, anytime you're charged, it costs you a lot of money to defend yourself. We didn't even go into how much this has cost you and how you're even covering your attorneys, the wear and tear on your body, mentally, emotionally, all of that. And you still have to show up and do your job. We certainly can look at the case of Judge Deshaun Jones, who recently resigned in October of 2025. But he, although he did not give a stated reason for resigning, if you followed that whole case, and again, you can go and do the research on this, this occurred amid an election contest ruling. So he won his election, but he was the only judge who won his election who another judge was able to say, yeah, we're going to do a do-over, basically. Mm-hmm. We're going to set aside the will of the electorate. We're going to set aside the will of all the voters, And we're going to say you have to run again. Costs money, costs time, so on and so forth. And then, of course, if you get a judge to resign or if you get them pushed out, the governor can immediately appoint someone else to serve in that position. Usually in the state of Texas, it is not a reform-minded judge, right? So we see patterns of disenfranchisement at the trial court level, exclusion from the appellate and Supreme Court level. We see racialized crime panic narratives targeting Black judges. We certainly see that in your case. We see legal maneuvers and election contests that undermine Black judicial victories. We see replacement through gubernatorial appointments, and of course, the voter suppression that I've already talked about. Why does this matter to you? Wait until you ever have a case, right? Or your loved ones have a case. Judicial diversity reduces disparities and builds public trust. And so removing these judges actually damages our democratic process. What needs to change? We all need to be better educated, which is what we do here at Rethinking Freedom. We need expanded voting access. We need to regulate judicial PAC influence. We need to collect racialized data on discipline and election contests. And I'm so glad you're fighting back in the way that you are. We definitely need to strengthen law school pipelines. And let's not get into the Department of Education and the games that are being played now with who can access loans. And having said all of that, now let's get into the details of what is going on with you. So please.
Thank you, Aya. So I feel like in part one, we spent a good amount of time talking about just, laying the foundation for the conversation, but getting into the details of what has actually occurred where we are now, right? So starting off where we are, I am appealing the sanctions that the Commission on Judicial Conduct gave me in June of 2025. Now, these sanctions, many of them were pending since 2020. And that's one thing that recently has changed with the legislature as well as it relates to the commission. They now have timelines, because before, and including in my situation, they could just hold on to things forever and bring them up whenever they choose to address them. And that's problematic for a number of reasons. But in this case, them waiting until after the DA in Kaufman County explicitly stated in plain words that I committed no crime, it shows you that this is a political tool, the commission's actions. And because why would you wait? And not only why would you wait, but once a criminal DA has told you that I committed no crime, why would you pursue that sanction, that grievance? They didn't do me any favors. So it wasn't like this Republican DA or the Texas Rangers did not attempt to, because we didn't talk about earlier, there was a bailiff inside the courtroom. There were two bailiffs inside the courtroom because this was the pandemic, right? And the bailiff set up the laptops. And so you have to remember that when somebody creates a narrative, they have to remember to stretch that narrative to cover the whole truth, right? And they didn't do that because they forgot about the law enforcement officers that were inside the courtroom. And those law enforcement officers provided affidavits. And one of the officers spoke to the Texas Rangers, and the Texas Ranger contacted him again and said, this is bigger than what I thought it was. And your statement doesn't line up with the other people's statements. And so are you sure there's nothing you need to change? And he told him that he could face perjury charges. And the witness in the affidavit said, I felt like he was threatening me with perjury. And he said, I asked him, well, when you find out that I'm telling the truth and everybody else is not, are you going to charge them? And he said the Texas Ranger didn't have anything to say and ended the meeting. But that's confirmation bias. That's, you have decided what the story is and you're going to make everything fit. It's a triangle, but you're going to fit this box into the triangle. You're going to make it fit, right? That is confirmation bias at its best. When a witness is telling you they've told the truth, this is their statement, and you continue to try to urge them to change the statement. You even tell them, hey, your statement doesn't fit with the other statements. And it's like, what are we doing here? Are we searching for the truth? Are we looking, as those attorneys said in that November 2021 email, are we looking to make sure that I get charged with or at least investigated with the crime? And I would tell you that based on that law enforcement officer's affidavit, who doesn't work for me, he was, in law enforcement before he came and worked in my courtroom. He has no reason to fabricate anything, right? His truth was his truth, and it actually was the truth. And
so his narrative differed from the story they wanted to tell, which would have enabled them to find you guilty of a crime. And they were basically being coerced to change this image. And we see this, by the way, in criminal cases all the time, unfortunately, which is why we have so many exonerations. But carry on. One of the reasons we have so many exonerations.
And so, I'm grateful to that law enforcement officer that he stood his ground on truth and didn't do the easy thing. Because the easy thing would have been for him to change his statement so that the, Rangers would get off his back, right? But he spoke his truth. It was the truth. And I'm just grateful to God. He's been in this all along the way. And so it was just little things like that obviously concern me. But then I think, if I am a state district judge and this is happening to me, what is happening to people who don't have a platform, right? What is happening to people who don't have the means to fight the battles, right? And so there are so many instances of that, right, that I could tell you throughout my 5 years. But that one to me really stands out because this is one law enforcement officer to another law enforcement officer, right? And that threat of perjury, I mean, when you're telling the truth, it just showed, in addition to those emails, what the goal was, right? And so with that said, the appeal is to fight the sanctions. And when people say sanctions, let me just explain to you, there are certain degrees to this. The ultimate goal, what this small group of lawyers asked the commission to do, was to literally take me off the bench. Right? They didn't get what they asked for. Instead, the commission publicly sanctioned me. Now, a public sanction essentially means you cannot sit as a visiting judge. So once I finish my tenure on the bench, I can't come back and sit for another judge. Now, this is new. Okay, this is a change in the rules. And if you look at when the change happened and you look at what the bench started looking like, I'm going to leave it there for you to draw your own conclusions. But I will tell you this. There are judges sitting on the bench as visiting judges right now who were publicly sanctioned. So it's not like there's this new horrible thing that's happened. No, it's a change in the rules. So the rules were changed. And now if you have a public sanction, and it doesn't grandfather those people in, right? If you have a public sanction, you can't be a visiting judge. That's what my sanction is, right? In addition to being back in the newspaper, right? And so, like I said, there are others. There are others actually right now in Dallas County sitting who have public sanctions. But we don't want to make it plain for the community to say there's nothing different in the sanction. It's just that we changed the rules about what the sanction means, right? So in appealing the sanction, I now have to go through a trial, which I welcome. Like Comey said, let's have a trial. Let's keep the faith, right? Because for me, the truth is the truth. And so the truth has been told since 2020. And here we are in 2025. It's convenient when the commission gave me their ruling as well, right? They gave me their ruling in June of 2025. This is another election cycle, by the way. So my term ends December of 2026. And as a state district judge, your terms are 4 years, but you run for office every 2 years. So the filing deadline for my election cycle is December 8th of 2025. And so they knew that this would come down and be in the news again. It'd be another news cycle for me during an election season. So instead of handling it near or close to the time that the sanctions were filed, they've held on to the sanctions and waited, right? And so timing is everything too. Like, why would you wait? And so this would be an election season that I would be, fighting the commission again. And so that speaks volumes. There goes your October, November surprise, because
Mhm.
now I'm appealing the sanctions and that's in the news, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so just, the playbook, like we really have to be aware that this is not new, right? Every person that has been identified as a leader who's been effective in moving the people, right? Because even that small group of lawyers said, Givens is popular. I'm not popular just for the sake of being popular. I'm popular because the people see that I am here for the people. I was sent by the people. And when you're sent by the people, you're viewed as a disruptor, right? And we all want reform, but we never stick around to see what happens to the reformers. What do they go through? What does it look like when you literally stand in the gap? And I would tell you that it looks like this. It looks like what they're doing to me. And sometimes it's longer than 5 years, sometimes it's less. My experience has been 5 years, right?
5 years and counting.
5 years
Yeah.
and counting, yeah, because we're still, this appeal is even after December 11th, we won't have the decision, right? So the evidence will be put on December 10th and December 11th, but the ruling is going to come sometime thereafter, right? Which conveniently would be during an election cycle. And I keep
Mhm.
saying would be because I'm not running for reelection for judge. And I want to say it has nothing to do with the sanctions. It has nothing to do with their, all their coordinated efforts. Because if it did, I would have quit in 2020. Right. So this has nothing to do with it. It's God has told me that we're going to move on to something. He's got a higher calling for me. And so I've done everything that he asked me to do in these 3 terms that I've served the people of Dallas County. I have created an anti-forum shopping policy. We didn't even talk about that. That's where I found in 2018 that the then DA, not the current one, but then that DA and the police department, they were literally cherry picking courts for certain cases, certain murder cases, right? And there was a case involving a police officer's murder, 2, I believe, and they didn't want me to have the case because I'm too independent and I cannot be controlled. Right? There was a whole investigation about it. The first assistant at the time admitted that they did the case manipulation, and then he backtracked. He was like, "Oh, I was mistaken when I admitted that." I don't know anybody that admits doing something like that and you were mistaken, right? But it's that he admitted it to friends who were also on the bench, and he never thought they would repeat what he said, but they did, right? And so I created that anti-forum shopping policy because no matter what you're charged with, you should be entitled to a fair judge who's not picked by the DA's office and the police department, right? So those are things that I remember my PR person telling me in 2022. Judge, I mean, why didn't you have media surrounding that? I'm like, because I didn't do it for the media. That's the true signal of an elected official that believes they're a public servant. You don't always do things because you want media attention. So she's like, but that helps you when all this stuff pops up. And I said, I guess you're right when it comes to PR standards, but I did it for the people, not for myself. Right. And so that's just another one of the things that I did behind closed doors. So I'm not popular because it's the coolest thing ever to be a state district judge. I'm popular with the people because the people know that I don't mind the sacrifice for them. Right. And so in identifying me as a popular judge, it just means I'm effective in what I'm doing. And when you look through history at those that have been effective in creating change, the playbook is the same. I'm just going to say it. When you challenge the entrenched systems, the system and those that the system protects, they respond with investigations, they respond with surveillance, they respond with character attacks, and they attempt to delegitimize whoever this effective leader is. Okay.
Mhm.
And so that's what's happened here. If you say it enough in a headline, they believe that people will start believing it because they
Yes.
also know that people are attached to headlines. They don't read the substance and they may not even question the motives of the news outlet, right? But I would venture to say if you see one person always in the news, like always in the news, like always in the news, start questioning why. Why is this one person getting this much media attention? Because I'll tell
Mhm.
you, when things really happen, you find out on the back end about it. You're not really seeing them in the news all the time. It doesn't really work that way. And I have a prime example. There's a judge in Dallas County. I won't call her name, but she actually got charged with a crime, a DWI. And she happens to preside over the DWI court. Well, she was represented in that DWI. And this was 2020 when the DWI occurred, but 2021 when she got charged. She was represented by one of these attorneys on that email thread. Right? And so you saw two stories about her, when she got arrested and when she pled, right? You didn't see,
and without mentioning names, with I believe alcohol and cocaine in her system, in a car wrapped around a tree, and all of that.
You would have to pull the toxicology report, but I know that there was a car and a pole. And I know that there was a charge that she pled to. But you only saw her in the news twice. Once when she got arrested and once when she pled. And I juxtapose myself with her for this reason. There was no media onslaught of her. And I'm not trying to attack her. I'm just speaking facts right now, right? And with me, I didn't commit a crime. It was notated I didn't commit a crime after a full investigation. And somehow I end up in the news like every 3 months, right? And when the DA in Kaufman County said I didn't commit a crime, there wasn't like a whole big thing about it. It was just one story, right? And so that's when we have to start questioning the media. What is your objective? Right? And I would venture to say, since it's the same group of lawyers, that if they didn't like this judge, they would have been contacting the media to get stories, because there are all sorts of stories that could have come from that, right? But you only saw her in the media twice. Me, like I said, I need some stock in the news outlets, because I've even been on the front page, right? And so, we really have to start asking questions. I think this whole fake news concept came up years ago, right? Are the reporters
alternative facts?
Right. Are the news outlets, are they really investigative journalists? Right? Because if you're an investigative journalist, then you're subjective. You're objective. And you are looking at the facts. And you're not giving favor. You're just looking at the facts. The facts guide you. And the fact that they didn't want to print the emails that clearly state this small group of attorneys' goals speaks volumes, So I think they don't think that we are intelligent enough to catch what they're throwing. We are, right? I think sometimes we just need it to be highlighted for us, right? And so that is all motive, And with the appeal, now for the first time in 5 years, people are going to have to take the stand, take the oath, and say whatever they have to say. But meanwhile, I've been in the media and they've tried to damage my reputation, and we've never even heard from a witness. There's never been a witness on a witness stand. There's never, And so I'm excited. A lot of people did encourage me not to appeal. They're like, man, you just walk off into the sunset. You're not even running again. And I thought, the appeal isn't about me, right? Because it's about justice, and it's about giving kind of guideposts to people that come behind me, because I'm not the first and I won't be the last. And I need the people that come behind me to know and believe that they you don't have to be broken by this. Not only do you not have to be broken by it, but you can stand against it, right? And so the same way they're trying to use it as a warning for people, like, don't you do that. Don't you stand out. Don't you, it also can be encouragement for the people that come behind me, because we need courageous leaders. We need judges who, when you take that oath about equal protection under the law, that you mean it in everything that you do, not just when it's convenient, because it's always convenient when it's trending, right? And I need people behind me that come to know I can do it Judge Givens is an example of the fact that I can do it, right?
Yes.
And, we don't even think about, like you said, what is the impact on your life when you're going through these things? I've had conversations, with my colleague Deshaun Jones. We've talked about, not only do you have to do the job and be excellent at it, but then when you take off the robe, you have to pick up your sword and your shield and defend yourself against the things that are happening to you because you show up the way you show up, right? And so, we have to think about that as well. The reformers, the people that we want to stand in the gap, we have to stand up for them too, because
Yes.
it's lonely being on that island by yourself, right? And I will say it's only my relationship with God, literally, but God. We say it all the time. We quote Hebrews 11 all the time, but the application of that true faith, the size of a mustard seed, and literally standing, and being firm and having on the armor is real, and that's what has saved me, because in all of this, my mom transitioned to be with the Lord. So my mom
So
transitioned in
sorry for your
April.
loss.
Thank you. She transitioned in April. Her funeral was in May. And I was back in Austin testifying before this commission literally a month after I buried my mother. Right. And so, those of us who are standing in the gap, we have personal lives as well.
And at the same time, you are overseeing this empowerment program that you are self-funding and
So, yeah.
spending time outside of your time on the bench,
Mm-hmm.
your personal time, trying to assist some
Yeah.
very vulnerable members of our community so that they can come out and be productive citizens.
Right. Along with the word of mouth series. That was another series that I created on the bench, because I know that the public gets their information about the system through word of mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not always the correct source. So the word of mouth series, the goal was to demystify the system for the public. And so I picked the MLK Center, which is historically a neighborhood that has not had access to this information, to host these events so that we could talk about the real things, like, what are your rights when the police come to your house and execute a search warrant? Because it happens to people, but they don't know what to do, right? And, what are your rights when you get stopped? Like, that was actually one of our most popular sessions, was a guide to traffic stops, because people don't know all the things, you know what I mean? And we saw at the height of, the, gosh, I can't even pinpoint a year, because so many things happen at traffic stops where people are not going home, right? But we saw the importance that it's applicable to everyone, regardless of what you look like, where you come from, right? That you need this information, and knowledge is power. And so doing things like that, I owe the community. So they've elected me. And so beyond being on the bench, I have a responsibility to be in the community, right? And so it's another reason why it's not a popularity contest, but for them to identify me as popular is because they know that I'm out here doing the work. You don't just see me during election season. You see me all the time. I live in our neighborhood. I shop at our neighborhood stores. I take the public elevator at the courthouse, and people are always looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, I can be amongst the people. I
Yeah.
serve the people. I'm not afraid to be on an elevator with the people.
Mm-hmm.
I've even had people's family members campaign for me that I sent to the pen. And they knew, though, that their family member, whatever time I gave them, it wasn't retaliation. It was, they earned the time, right? And I did not throw the book at them. I didn't throw them away. I was fair. And
Mm-hmm.
so that, to me, speaks volumes, because for family members and even people who have been on probation in my court and are now off, they have donated time to campaign for me, because those are the real life examples of, what it looks like what does justice really look like, as opposed to you just listening to me on the campaign trail. So that's like, those are actually the endorsements that I think are the most important. The people who have actually experienced you on the bench,
Mm-hmm.
how did you make them feel? Were you fair? And I'll say this, in 11 years, I've never been overturned by a higher court. And it's not because, it's because I have a commitment to the law. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
doing anything to anyone based on favor or anything. It's fairness, right? That speaks volumes. That is your judge's report card. Like, I know these small organizations do like, they do polls on judges, right?
Mhm.
I would say contact your appellate court in your region and say, hey, how many times has this judge been reversed? Because if they're getting reversed, it's because they're doing something they shouldn't have been doing, right? It's because they weren't following the law. It's because they maybe didn't know the law. Those are the questions you need to start asking once you figure out how often they've been reversed. But nobody is sharing this information with our community. That's what's key. Not does this local newspaper or this local elected official endorse them. What are they doing for the people where they deserve the people's vote?
Yes. Yes. And so, again, for all of our listeners, we should all be very concerned about this. Judge Amber Givens, thank you for, first of all, stepping up to serve in this manner. I would hazard to guess that if you were running a law firm, you'd be making more money than what you make as a judge. So there is a certain amount of sacrifice that comes with that. That's public scrutiny. And then just knowing that because you are someone who wants to act with such fairness and as a result are challenging the status quo, the system, that yes, the system, as you mentioned, will turn around and try to protect itself by getting you out of the way. And so for all of us who are justice minded, fairness minded, very important that we show up in support for Judge Gibbons and also for other people that are out there who are reformers in our community, because it is often a very lonely, very expensive walk. And it takes a toll on relationships, it takes a toll on their finances, it takes a toll on their physical and mental health. And thank God, as you have shared repeatedly, you have your faith. Um, and I believe some family or friends who are supporting you. But I know this is not easy. And I know hiring attorneys to now represent you is no small change at all.
No.
And so, again, I would just beseech everyone, do your research. It's really important that we become more savvy in terms of the news that we consume and in terms of thinking critically and asking the questions and challenging the things that are said and asking questions about the things that they're silent on, but also really showing up and showing support in every way that we can for those who are actively standing in the gap for the rest of us. Is there anything else that you would like to say as we end today?
Just I would love to see y'all in Austin on December 10th or 11th. I understand that, maybe you can't give me both days, but December 10th or the 11th in Austin, go on my Instagram page at Judge Amber Givens. All the details are there. It's public, okay? This is our courtroom. And I need you all to stand in the gap for me. I need you all to show up. We need to fill that space. And so if it's you and 3 other people in the car, come on. That's
What
4
what
people.
yeah, what outcome do you want to see as a result of this trial?
I'm going to tell you, I really, for me, what matters is that I stood up for myself,
Okay.
right? Because I know that, they picked 2 Republican judges and 1 Democrat. When I prayed, I said, God, no matter what their party affiliation is, just move them, convict them to do the right thing, right? And because I know what the signs say. The signs say that this is political because their words have said it, because their actions have shown it. And so for me, it's really about me having the strength to stand up for myself, because a lot of people wouldn't have made it this far. And so regardless of what they do, I want them to do the right thing. But regardless of what they do, I know the truth. And the people will too, because they're going to be on the record now. And all the emails, the emails are public. They've been public. And I really want you all to go see them. Go share them. Their posts, you can share them. That's important for the people to know the truth. So that's it for me. I'm just grateful that God has given me the opportunity to be able to afford a defense, and my defense is, I mean, Jackson Walker, Chip Babcock, like we're not, pretty major defense team, and I'm just grateful. So for me, it's about me standing in the gap for me, because oftentimes we stand in the gap for other people. It's a whole nother thing to stand in the gap for yourself. So,
and we should be standing right there in that gap with you. My final statement on this would be, for all of us who have ever been part of a disenfranchised group, whether you're female, whether you consider yourself or seen as Black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, whether you have you're differently abled, whether you have a different sexual orientation than what is the status quo, what we know for sure is that any of the rights we currently enjoy today came at a cost. Someone fought back. Sometimes they took what we would say on the streets an L, but just them fighting back put like a marker, and then someone else saw it and built on that and fought again. As Frederick Douglass said, how did he put it? Power concedes nothing without a demand. And this appeal is basically, this trial is basically a demand, in my eyes, that Judge Amber Gibbons is making on power. And it is all are in our history, all of the people who have challenged power, who've challenged the status quo, who have allowed any of us to sit in the positions of privilege that we may have now, where now women can vote or people of color can vote, although they're still working on suppressing those votes, where we can, women in particular, where we can now go and sign contracts and own businesses and open bank accounts and so on and so forth. These things were not the case before. As a matter of fact, just some history for you all here. There was a time when a husband could say, my wife disrespected me, she's crazy, and she would be locked up in a sanitarium just based on the word of her husband because she, quote unquote, disrespected him, whatever that means. And any of the rights we have now are because some brave person basically took the system on their backs and said, I'm going to fight. And so, Judge Amber Gibbons, thank you for your courage that you have shown in so many different ways. And for those of you who are praying for, because I know that the radio stations we're on, we got a lot of Christians on there, pray for justice. Come out and hear the evidence for yourself. You don't have to look at what I think should be the case or even what Judge Amber Gibbons thinks should be the outcome. Come out and hear the evidence for yourself and get a better understanding of our system and get involved in the system. We must demand change of the systems that we're in. Well, those systems will eventually crush you when they're done crushing other people, because it always moves on. So again, thank you so much for taking so much time with us today, for allowing us to have a part 1 and a part 2 so that people really can get into this deeper. Please go to our Instagram page. It's going to be in our description on our YouTube channel. Go to our Facebook page. Come out to Austin. Let's fight for justice. This fight is ours.
Thank you.
Thank you.